What you're losing in Grayson is not just the three-point shooting. He's such a good all-around player too. I think we kind of, we didn't really understand that that's what we were getting when we got him last year, and then he surprised us all.
I wonder though, if you look at it, is it easier to find a guy that can hit threes at a decent clip, or is it easier to find that rim rolling big and a backup point guard? And does that start to come in to it? Do you feel a rim rolling big can actually, to your point, make things easier on the big three, potentially make it where the offense makes a little bit more sense for these guys, and maybe you take a 5 percentage point hit on who's shooting those threes, but does that make them better? These are the kind of things that they're going to be asking themselves in the room, knowing that they have so few options and have to explore.
But the great thing about this, though, because of the scenario that Grayson is in and the fact that he can't be traded until October, is you have plenty of time in the offseason to find, maybe that rim running big if you can get him in the draft, or maybe there's a, some other smaller trade that can happen to shore that up, or a three-point shooter, either one of those two. And so I think you have plenty of time to identify what you're really going to need by the time you get to a scenario, if this ever presented itself in real life, to trade Grayson Allen. I just don't see it, because what you're losing in Grayson is not just the three-point shooting. He's such a good all-around player too. I think we kind of, we didn't really understand that that's what we were getting when we got him last year, and then he surprised us all with his level of play. So, Nick Richards, I don't feel like would be a good trade-off. I don't think both of them would. So
I think you bring up a good point, though, because if you find a guy that you feel really good about from a three-point shooting perspective, or a couple guys in other moves, maybe you do at that point explore in October or at the trade deadline or whenever options with Allen too. Not that you want to, but if you feel like there are still problems, that you're trying to fix.
I would say that if I had to replace one or the other, or if I wanted to find one or the other, I would more want to find the rim running big than I would the perimeter shooter, because I feel like if you're going with the rim running big, that frees up the perimeter and obviously the other parts of Book, KD, Beal's game that you want to be freed up. And we didn't really have that last year. They tried to make Drew Eubanks that guy, but he just wasn't. So I think that's a little bit more reliable at the rim than a perimeter shooter, especially once you get to playoff time. I mean, you've seen Lively just going crazy, but they're fucking all dunks. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're asking them to shoot. Whereas, you start having to come up with those clutch buckets in crunch time. It changes the narrative a little bit when you're shooting from 30 feet out.
So you bring up Lively. The Afro Buzz in the chat said we don't need to make moves per se. Eubanks can do what Lively does if we build some chemistry. Do you feel like Eubanks could be closer to that?
Eubanks has got good athleticism, but he's not nearly the standing vert type of dude that Derek Lively is. Plus, he's not as tall as him, and he's not as long as him either. Those two factors matter. He gets about another foot advantage over Drew Eubanks than Drew has. So I think that's a big difference there.
And I do agree that, like, this is a roster that you don't need to make a drastic move. I think if you tinker around the margins, like we've identified, they need bigger, more defensive-minded wings, upgrade the center rotation. That doesn't necessarily mean replacing Nurk, but it does mean having more alternatives for those playoff series where Nurk can't stay on the floor, backup point guard. Like, two of those three things, I think you can get most of what you need at the center spot and backup point guard spot with vet minimums. It's the defensive-minded wings that if you're looking for starting caliber or even playoff rotation caliber wings, like those are probably the ones that you're hoping you can trade for. But again, like a lot of these options are pretty limited. Teams aren't just going to give up starting caliber wings, even with Grayson, being in the mix if that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and the toughest thing too is you don't know what impact Budenholzer is going to have. How much does he fix in what you had last year? There's so many question marks about all this that I think that adds a level of a degree of difficulty this offseason, because you really don't know with him how much it's going to affect. So how much do you change and how much can that impact all of them?
Yeah.